Hi, this is Suzanne Wagner. Thank you for joining me. I am continuing my stories about the Ballet World, and this one is Ballet West Kid Tours, discovering the backwards towns of rural Utah. Going through old pictures the other day, I discovered some snapshots of our yearly journeys with Ballet West on our school programs. Utah was unique in that the state government was very proactive in wanting to bring the arts into the schools to introduce a variety of artistic possibilities to the students. This yearly journey made up about a third of our budget for the year, Nutcracker being a third, other performances and donations being a third, but also the state arts programs in the schools being another third. So each year we would put together a program designed to include children on the stage to bring education in the form of various arts, programs, and performances. I always thought that such a thing was so incredibly valuable to introduce art to kids, to show them that there were other ways to inspire creative expression and open eyes and hearts to the joys of music, dance, and singing. The Utah Symphony and the Opera also did school programs. The first thing I would like to say is that while in the 1980s, Salt Lake City was about 40% Mormon, when you got out of the Salt Lake Basin, the rural areas of the state are about 90+% Mormon. In my day, we would even go into the towns and schools that were in the polygamist areas. While many are known in the Hilldale area of southern Utah, they are peppered around the entire state. I remember going down a dirt road with the bus we were on and seeing a sign indicating to not cross the road if there was a rain, because the road crossed many arroyos or washes where a dry creek or stream can suddenly and temporarily fill and overflow a roadway. It is amazing how many remote and desolate places are still found in Utah. This one particular town looked like a throwback to the 1800s, with the ladies in old-time clothing, with their hair up and under a bonnet. The men were few and far between, because it was a polygamous group and there was no need to have a lot of men, preferably not to have a lot of men. As we drive in, the whole town has shown up to meet us. There are about 80 children of all ages that all look the same. About 20 women, all dressed in the old style, and about 8 men showed up with serious scowls, large, rough farming hands, and long, burly beards. We go to the school and set up for our performance as the town is excited and there is much talking and commotion happening in the audience. Our program includes explaining what ballet is, why we do it, asking children to come up on the stage and dancing with us, showing the strength of the men and how they can lift women over their head, a demonstration of power, timing, and working together, and a performance. This particular show was fascinating for many reasons. The first was that there were few men in the audience, many more women who were very excited to see anything different, and a ton of children that all looked alike. In fact, everyone seemed to be a carbon copy of another. The inbreeding was fascinating, and there were a disproportionate number of children with obvious signs of genetic problems, such as Down syndrome, foot drop, tics, and various forms of retardation. My sister had done part of her residency at Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City, Utah, and she said that there were many genetic studies done in Utah because of the high proportion of genetic disorders because of the inbreeding. The second very interesting thing was that the show started with a very Mormon prayer and sermon. My first year doing these programs, I was stunned because I thought we were supposed to have a separation of church and state. But clearly in Utah, no one cared or bothered with such things. In fact, more often than not, in the small remote schools of western, southern, and eastern Utah, it happened. And regardless of what we believed, we had to act in accordance with the rules and the beliefs of that area. I tried my first year to whisper my concern and say something to the other dancers, and I was shushed. Utah was a place that, at the time, was behind the rest of the country that I knew by at least 20 years. It has since caught up on many levels, but it still struggles with the huge influx of people from other places, spaces, countries, and beliefs. It is learning to become a melting pot, and I believe it is doing fairly well considering how backwards it was when I got there in 1982. The school tours were brutal because most dancers start class at 9 a.m., such a lovely and reasonable time to get going and working. But schools wanted us there for their first period classes, which meant we were up often at 5 a.m. to drive to the school in remote areas that did not have a hotel large enough to accommodate us back then. Getting dancers up at that hour was difficult. We are tired, exhausted from daily performances, not in our own beds, and without our comfort foods, mainly coffee. If you are going to get a dancer up at the crack of dawn, coffee is helpful. But in rural Mormon Utah, coffee is a no-no. The Mormon religion does not allow for coffee or caffeinated drinks. I'm sure most of the world does not know that it was in the Utah market that caffeine-free Coca-Colas were invented. Yup. The Mormon Church owned a lot of stock in Coca-Cola and had a pull to produce the first caffeine-free drink, manufacturing plants in Utah. So here you have exhausted dancers performing on a very small stage that the floors are often hard as rock or cement, which makes our legs take a pounding and feel like lead. Our joints are aching, and we are sleeping in unfamiliar beds that are often not the most comfortable, sitting for long hours in buses, and still trying to get everything together to have a good show that is inspiring to young people. Oh, and no coffee. After a week of early morning risings, it was our ongoing joke to try and manipulate the bus drivers to go to the truck stop so we could get coffee, which they often smiled and accommodated our whining and cajoling. I remember going into a school and smelling the amazing aroma of baking cinnamon buns. Being the eater that I was, I go following my nose to find the cafeteria and run excitedly up to the women baking these amazing huge rolls and ask if we could buy cinnamon buns. And they smiled and said, "Of course." I thought I had won the lottery, to the point that I inadvertently asked them, "Oh my goodness, this is so great. Do you have coffee to go with those amazing rolls?" Only to watch them shut down hard, retreat, and in an astounded way, they immediately said, horrified, "No, we don't ever have coffee here." I politely accept the warm cinnamon buns and slink out of the cafeteria. Then I run to the bus driver and give him $20 to go and get as many coffees as he can at this truck stop, which he instantly does because I promise a warm cinnamon bun when he gets back. I remember stories from other dancers that during their programs, they were to do a variation of graduation ball during the competition scene in which two dancers compete in a turning sequence that is hard on a good floor, but a bad floor, it was not just difficult, it was dangerous. The two dancers, one of them being my friend Marianne Lind, got into cahoots with the other and decided to take out the difficult turns and instead change the choreography to a dance competition rather than a turning competition. A fabulous idea, but not the plan or the sequence that was planned. They carried it off brilliantly, but Sandra Sugai came back afterwards, and Marianne smiled sweetly and said, "Are we fired?" To which Sandra said, "Not quite." So much for trying to do something different. I remember doing a show where I was the master of ceremonies, meaning that I was the one talking rather than dancing. I engaged the audience and brought them up on stage to dance with us and ask questions to the audience for them to respond. But in this particular show, in the western area that is part of the Uinta-Ouray Indian reservations in Utah, by the way, this is one of the most remote and desolate places, and the roads are barely there. The principal at the school told us that the school buses had to start picking kids up for school at 5 a.m. because of the terrible poverty in the area. They fed the kids breakfast, lunch, and they gave them a snack bag to take home with them because without that food, the children would have trouble and probably no dinner. They learned that concentrating and learning was just helpful if they did 3 meals a day as part of their budget, and testing scores improved immensely. Imagine that. We begin this show, and in non-Native American schools, it is often the young girls that want to come up onto the stage and dance with us. So in this format of the performance, I ask for the girls to come up that want to dance with us. But no one moves. Confused, I try again, saying, I know there are girls out there that would love to dance with us and show us some of the native dances that they know. Come on up and let's share and dance together. Again, no one moves. Then it dawns on me that in the Native American tradition, it is mostly the men that dance. So I switch gears and I say, how about some of you boys? Will you come up and show us your dances? Suddenly, there is a rush of young boys to the stage. The audience starts clapping hands and feet to the beat of Indian drums, and the young boys take over the stage, excited, happy, showing off, very serious about their dances, and form of joyful bedlam ensues. After the show, it was the young men that came up and wanted autographs from our male dancers. I learned a lot that day about cultural norms and biases that I held. I learned that from that point on, I always invited both girls and boys up. I believe that such programs are very important to educate young people on the beauty, joy, skills, and ways of artists. I commend the Utah state government for recognizing that value and making it a priority for their state. I think it gives opportunity and the hope of a more balanced diversity to their state. And we got to see a lot of the beautiful countryside of Utah, areas I would have never known about, including a few roads I would like to forget that were really only one-way roads and we were taking a bus down, while the dancers were praying that no one would come towards us from the opposite directions while we were on the cliff. And those prayers were gratefully answered. I remember getting to the bottom of a very steep decline, and we got down just in time to finally not be on the cliff, only to see a half-mile away a truck coming towards us. Whew. Those times, I remember less about all the individual schools, but more about the companionship and rambunctiousness of all the dancers. Perhaps it was because we were all young and so full of energy. Perhaps it is because ballet companies are like a giant dysfunctional family. Perhaps ballet attracts a certain type of individual that loves to play, be wildly expressive, and creatively unruly. I am sure it is all of the above. It is a unique expression that is always raw and authentic. One cannot be a dancer and not realize that everyone knows your weaknesses, your every weakness, flaw, talent, and abilities. We cannot hide anything. After all, we are practically naked with each other all day, every day. One learns as a ballet dancer to move in extremes. We can move from highly focused and very determined and serious to ridiculously playful, silly, teasing, sensually engaged, and willing to be foolish and look foolish. We are a very tactile group. We are constantly bumping into each and touching each other. We are not so fearful about our bodies or the bodies of others. We share one heart and one mindset, even though we have our own unique individual expressions. We are wildly carefree and will push the envelope if it seems unfair. But we will also work overtime and not expect to get paid what we are worth. That's because we know no one can really afford to pay us what we are really worth. The effort, training, skills, coordination, talent, determination, and ability to move with and through many forms of music and styles is a passion and a purpose. I have learned being retired from ballet that the joy is less about watching ballet because the greatest bliss comes from actually doing ballet. I am a junkie in the expression of this art form and form of movement through my own body. While I can appreciate the tremendous beauty and skill of another dancer, it is not the same as feeling it deep inside my soul while I'm doing it. If they are very good, they can take me for a ride through their movement, grace, skill, and spirit, but it is not the same as feeling my soul gift that deepest, authentic part of my sensual passion to others. Ballet offers up a type of euphoria and grace that is nothing less than a prayer to the divinity inside us. It is an attempt to touch that greater divinity that is outside each of us, and we become the conduit that attempts to bring fleeting beauty, uplift spirits, and give hope in a world that so desperately needs it. I hope my words are doing that for you now. I have traded in my point shoes for a ballpoint pen, and I practice every day diligently with that same artistic grace and passion to open a doorway into your mind and heart so you can feel that deep within you right now is a power and depth there for you to tap into at any point in time. While my art has changed its form, it did not change its purpose, message, or gift. Thank you for joining me in this dance of lyrics and feeling into the rhythms of the verses in my soul.